Imagine waking up in a city where half the people you know are gone. Imagine hearing church bells ring day and night. Imagine walking through streets once filled with merchants, children, and laughter, only to find silence. Doors remain closed. Windows remain dark. Entire families vanish in days. No medicine exists. No cure exists. No one knows what is happening. Kings fear it. Priests fear it. Doctors fear it. And before it ends, tens of millions of people will die. This is the terrifying true story of the Black Death, the plague that changed the world forever. The year was 1347. Europe looked very different from the world we know today. There were no cars, no electricity, no modern hospitals. Powerful kings ruled kingdoms protected by stone castles. Farmers worked the land from sunrise to sunset. Merchants traveled dangerous roads carrying silk, spices, and precious goods from distant lands. Life was difficult, but for many people it was familiar. No one knew that history was about to face one of its darkest chapters. Far to the east beyond Europe, trade routes stretched across Asia. These routes connected civilizations for thousands of miles. They carried wealth. They carried knowledge. They carried culture. But hidden among the cargo was something deadly. Tiny fleas, small rats, and a dangerous bacterium that would kill millions. Historians believe the disease responsible for the Black Death originated somewhere in Central Asia. Trade had become increasingly important. Merchants traveled constantly. Ships crossed seas. Caravans crossed deserts. Every journey connected people from distant lands. Unfortunately, diseases traveled too. The bacteria lived inside fleas. Those fleas lived on rats. And rats traveled everywhere humans did. No one noticed the danger. After all, rats were common. They lived in markets. They lived on ships. They lived in homes. Nobody imagined these small creatures would help spread one of history's greatest disasters. As trade expanded westward, the disease moved silently with it. City after city became infected. But Europe still remained unaware. For now, everything changed in 1347. Merchant ships arrived at the port of Messina in Sicily. First, people were excited. Trade ships usually meant wealth and opportunity. Merchants prepared their goods. Dock workers approached the vessels. Families watched from the harbor. But something was terribly wrong. The sailors aboard the ships looked sick. Very sick. Many were already dead. Others lay weak and helpless. Their bodies were covered with strange swellings. Some burned with fever. Others coughed blood. Many could barely speak. Terrified citizens quickly realized they had never seen anything like this before. Authorities ordered the ships to leave immediately. But it was already too late. The disease had arrived. Within days, people in the city began showing symptoms. At first, victims experienced fever and weakness. Then painful swellings appeared beneath the skin. These swellings, called buboes, often formed near the neck, groin, or armpits. The pain was unbearable. Victims became exhausted. Their skin sometimes darkened. Many died within days. The disease spread rapidly. Family members cared for sick relatives only to become infected themselves. Doctors had no answers. Medicine during the Middle Ages was extremely limited. People did not understand bacteria. They did not understand germs. The microscope had not yet been invented. Many believed disease spread through poisonous air. Others blamed the stars. Some believed the plague was punishment from God. Fear spread even faster than the disease. As news traveled, panic followed. The plague moved across Italy, then France, then Spain, then England. Everywhere it went, death followed. Cities became silent. Markets closed. Trade stopped. Schools shut down. Farmers abandoned their fields. Entire communities disappeared. Imagine living in a world where every day brought news of more deaths. Neighbors vanished. Friends disappeared. Families broke apart. Nobody knew who would be next. Even the wealthy could not escape. Kings feared infection. Nobles fled their homes. Priests prayed desperately. Doctors experimented with strange treatments. Some burned herbs. Some carried flowers. Others wore unusual masks filled with perfumes, believing sweet smells could protect them. Nothing worked. The plague continued spreading. One of the most famous images of the era is the plague doctor. These doctors wore long robes and strange bird-like masks. The beaks were stuffed with herbs and perfumes. People believed these scents would block disease. Today the masks look frightening, but at the time they represented hope. Sadly, hope was in short supply. Hospitals became overwhelmed, churches filled with prayers, cemeteries filled with graves. Soon there were too many dead to bury properly. Mass graves became common. Workers buried dozens of bodies together. In some cities, people feared touching the dead. The scale of death became almost impossible to comprehend. Entire villages vanished. Some towns lost half their population. Others lost even more. The world seemed to be collapsing. Many people believed the end of civilization had arrived. The Black Death showed no mercy. Young or old, rich or poor, powerful or weak. The plague treated everyone the same. Even rulers were not safe. Fear changed human behavior. People avoided crowds. Some refused to help sick relatives. Others fled into the countryside hoping to escape. But many unknowingly carried the disease with them. The plague spread further, faster, deadlier. By 1348, much of Europe had become infected. The disaster reached England. Cities such as London suffered terribly. Streets once filled with life became quiet. Businesses closed. Workers disappeared. Food shortages increased. People prayed for miracles. Yet the deaths continued. In some places, church bells rang constantly for funerals. Eventually, there were too many funerals to count. Imagine hearing bells every day, knowing each ring meant another life lost. Children lost parents. Parents lost children. Entire generations disappeared. The emotional scars lasted for centuries. No one knew when the nightmare would end. The disease seemed unstoppable. Historians estimate that between 25 and 50 million people died in Europe alone. Some estimates suggest the number may have been even higher. At a time when Europe's population was far smaller than today, this was catastrophic. Some regions lost 1/3 of their people. Others lost half. Imagine half your city disappearing. Imagine every second person you know suddenly gone. That was the reality of the Black Death. And yet, the greatest changes were only beginning. Because the plague did more than kill millions. It changed the course of history itself. The Black Death was not simply a disease. It was a force powerful enough to reshape entire civilizations. As millions died across Europe, society itself began to change. Fields stood empty. Shops remained closed. Workshops fell silent. The people who had once built cities and farmed land were gone. And suddenly labor became precious. Before the plague, many peasants had little power. They worked long hours for wealthy landowners. Life was difficult. Opportunities were limited. But after the Black Death, everything changed. With so many workers dead, survivors became valuable. Landowners desperately needed farmers. Businesses desperately needed craftsmen. For the first time in generations, ordinary workers could demand better wages. Some refused to work for old prices. Others moved to new towns seeking better opportunities. The balance of power slowly shifted. The world that existed before the plague was disappearing. Kings and nobles grew worried. They feared losing control. In some places, rulers passed laws trying to prevent workers from demanding higher wages. But history was changing. The old system was weakening. Many historians believe the Black Death helped accelerate the decline of feudalism in Europe. A disaster had unexpectedly begun transforming society itself. But even as life slowly changed, the fear remained. People still searched desperately for answers. Why had this happened? Who was responsible? Without scientific knowledge, many turned to superstition. Rumors spread rapidly. Some blamed foreigners. Others blamed minorities. Fear often led to terrible acts of violence. In times of crisis, people sometimes search for someone to blame. History shows us how dangerous fear can become when combined with ignorance. Meanwhile, religion became even more important to many people. Churches filled with worshippers seeking comfort. Some prayed constantly. Others joined religious movements hoping to earn forgiveness from God. Yet the plague spared neither sinner nor saint. Priests died beside peasants. Nobles died beside farmers. The disease respected no boundaries. Across Europe, survivors struggled to rebuild their lives. Entire families had disappeared. Children became orphans. Homes stood empty. Abandoned villages slowly returned to nature. Forests expanded into once cultivated land. In some places, nature reclaimed what humanity had left behind. Travelers described silent roads and deserted settlements. It seemed as though the world itself had changed. The emotional scars ran deep. Imagine surviving while everyone around you disappeared. Imagine losing parents, siblings, friends, and neighbors within months. Many survivors carried grief for the rest of their lives. Stories of the plague passed from generation to generation. Parents warned children about the years of death. Communities remembered the tragedy for centuries. The Black Death became more than history. It became memory. Even after the worst years had passed, outbreaks continued appearing from time to time. Cities remained fearful. Whenever unusual sickness appeared, panic often followed. The shadow of the plague remained over Europe for hundreds of years. Yet humanity endured. People rebuilt. Cities recovered. Trade slowly returned. Life continued. History often shows that even after great disasters, civilization finds ways to survive. But one question remained unanswered. What exactly caused the plague? For centuries nobody knew. The mystery lasted hundreds of years. Then science finally provided answers. Modern researchers discovered that the Black Death was caused by a bacterium known as Yersinia pestis. This tiny organism spread primarily through fleas living on rats. When infected fleas bit humans, the disease spread rapidly. Crowded cities and poor sanitation allowed it to move quickly. The medieval world had unknowingly created ideal conditions for disaster. Today, scientists study ancient graves to learn more about the plague. Archaeologists uncover burial sites containing victims of the Black Death. Researchers examine DNA preserved in bones and teeth. Each discovery helps solve mysteries hidden for centuries. Modern medicine has transformed humanity's ability to fight disease. Antibiotics can now treat plague infections if caught early. Hospitals understand how infections spread. Doctors know about bacteria and hygiene. The world that faced the Black Death had none of these advantages. That is why the plague became so deadly. The Black Death remains one of the most devastating events in human history. Its impact extended far beyond disease. Changed economies, changed governments, changed religion, changed labor, changed society itself. Some historians even argue that the transformations caused by the plague helped create conditions that eventually led to the Renaissance. A tragedy of unimaginable scale may have helped shape the modern world. History is full of strange contradictions. Sometimes destruction creates change. Sometimes suffering reshapes civilizations. And sometimes the smallest creatures can alter the course of history. Think about it. A tiny flea, a common rat, an invisible bacterium. Together they change the fate of continents. Few events in history have had such enormous consequences. More than 600 years later, people still study the Black Death. Books continue to be written. Documentaries continue to be made. Scientists continue searching for answers. Because the story of the Black Death is not only about death. It is also about survival. About resilience. About how humanity responds when faced with unimaginable challenges. The plague revealed both the worst and best of human nature. Fear, panic, violence, but also courage, compassion, and perseverance. Doctors risked their lives to care for the sick. Families remained together despite danger. Communities rebuilt after losing almost everything. Humanity endured. And perhaps that is why the story still matters today. Because history is not merely a collection of dates and events. History is the story of people. People who suffered. People who survived. People who changed the world. The Black Death was one of humanity's darkest chapters. Yet from darkness came transformation. From tragedy came change. And from survival came a new world. More than 600 years have passed since the plague swept across Europe. The castles remain. The churches remain. The cities remain. But the world that existed before the Black Death is gone forever. The plague did not simply kill millions. It changed history itself. And that is why, centuries later, the Black Death remains one of the most important and terrifying stories ever told. Because sometimes the events that shape history are not wars or kings. Sometimes they are invisible. And sometimes the smallest enemies leave the biggest scars. If you enjoyed this historical documentary, subscribe to the Story Files for more forgotten disasters, ancient mysteries, and unbelievable true stories from history. Because sometimes the most unbelievable stories are the ones that actually happened.